Let's move on to the shortages discussion. This actually fits perfectly with what we were just talking about in terms of the jobs report, which is that we have some crazy shortages right now of literally everything. I did a monologue a couple of months ago with chlorine, all the way from chlorine, semiconductors, you guys know I care a lot about, that goes into the phones, PS5, that's how you probably have had it manifested in your life. That's why the used car market is totally out of control because nobody can buy a new car right now. It's the same thing whenever it comes, actually, we just had to, we have some very special announcements here at Breaking Points, and which are basically taking forever for the same reason because of that. Whenever we bought the new computer in order to edit our show and we needed some high-end thing, it took like 2.5 months. Yeah. This is happening everywhere. I'm sure every person out there is having this manifested. Well, CNN, for once, actually went out and did some great journalism here. You'll rarely hear me say it, but they got onto a helicopter and actually showed everybody what the backup at the U.S. ports look like. For those who are just listening, they do a decent job of narrating. For those who are watching, you guys are going to enjoy this. Let's take a listen.
This is where the global supply chain meets the U.S. economy, says Coast Guard Commander Stephen Bohr.
It's record-breaking. It's unprecedented. There are more ships than there are parking spots. We are effectively operating a cell phone waiting lot in the Pacific Ocean.
This bottleneck of container ships, as far as the eye can see, carries more than half the made-in-Asia items purchased by the American consumer.
You're looking at all of the electronics. You're looking at all of the home goods. You're looking at all of the things that people are looking forward to buy this coming holiday season. 0
ships usually stay parked here. But on this day, Commander Bohr counts 55 in the ports and more drifting further out in the Pacific. While worst here, the backup is at all West Coast U.S. ports.
What does that indicate to you about what's happening in the supply chain?
I think everybody can see that things are slowing down.
Slowing down and piling up at sea and at the ports of entry. This is what happens when a global economy snaps back after the COVID slump of 2020. American consumers are back, buying with force, but the supply chain is struggling to catch up.
No, she's getting to exactly what I'm talking about there, Marshall. And you could see that 55 ships sitting out there circling the port of Los Angeles. I'm looking here at a CBS Los Angeles local story. 500,000 shipping containers right now are sitting off of the coast of Los Angeles and Long Beach waiting to be unloaded. And another thing I recently found out, which is that part of the problem is that our past system, there was a decent equalizing flow of shipping containers to the United States and back to China. Well, guess what? Because it's a one-way relationship right now, we've got all the shipping containers coming here, but we don't have anything going back to China. So the Chinese woke up one day and they're like, hey, we don't have any shipping containers. So then what's even worse is we had to send entire ships back of just empty shipping containers back to China. That's a huge drag on the global supply chain. It creates all kinds of crazy stuff. I was listening and talking over the weekend with somebody who's familiar with semiconductors. I don't know if you guys know this. It takes 200 days, 200 from conception to production for a single semiconductor chip in the world's best fabs. So you take that and you multiply it across everywhere. That's part of the reason that we're seeing such massive and crazy price fluctuations across everything. All of it, it seems to be, you can trace back to screwing around with the economy is crazy. And right now, if you're going to order something for Christmas for your for a significant other, for your parent or wife or whatever, I would start ordering right now, folks, because it is not going to get better by December. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, and look, the big key thing here, I saw this joke on Twitter where someone said, look, if you're going to buy anything for your kids, buy them an NFT because it literally will be the only thing available on the stores here. Well, right. Once again, the story here is much similar to the job story we just told, which is that they're all at least interlocking figures. You could look at every single thing that Saagar just talked about and you could say, hey, it's the fact that the Longshoremen's Union in LA is not unloading things at the proper rate. You could say, hey, there's something about China, there's something about stores not being able to keep up with supply. The bigger point here, and this is once again a conventional wisdom COVID take, is we have this massive interlocking system pre-COVID. It's globalization. It's the fact that you could transfer goods with shipping containers across the entire world. You can get your IKEA, you can get your thing at CVS, Walgreens, Fred Meyer, Albertsons, no matter where you are in the country. We had access to a ridiculous amount of goods, services, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And because of all the stresses with COVID, there is just a total inability of that system to work perfectly, so that when you have a longshoremen's union strike, when you have issues with individual truckers not being able to be hired, there's all these other factors that are going across. We really recommend you all read a piece by Derek Thompson at The Atlantic.
Just 1 second. Let's put this up there on the screen. Put it up there. Friend of the show, Derek Thompson. Just explain what Derek is talking about in here.
Yeah, he's once again just illustrating everything that we are talking about here, which is the fact that you have a global supply chain that is slowed down right at the moment when everyone is trying to do things. Everyone has a decent amount of savings, given the stimulus checks, given the unemployment insurance, given the fact that people weren't traveling as much for the past year and a half. So people are trying to buy things, yet the supply is going low, which is why everything's rising. This is also another reason why people can't just give cold takes about government spending causing inflation, because actually there are some pretty straightforward reasons why that's actually being driven. And once again, it's unclear. We're not just trying to explain for Joe Biden here. We are trying to say, because I know that there's someone who's throwing their phone at the screen saying, hey, like, if they just did this, if they did that. But as once again, with the unemployment thing we mentioned last story, there is not one clear policy fix that would actually adjust. Even if you just got down to the longshoremen's union and forced them to unload every single thing, it would not actually solve the fact that there are not enough truckers who would actually move those goods off of the area, and that actually leads to the buildup.
That's why I love this. And I'll just go ahead and do it. I'll push the button and piss off those people. This has nothing to do with government spending whatsoever. Literally not a single thing, which is that government spending has nothing to do. My favorite meme is gas prices. Guys, no matter who the president is, they don't have a goddamn thing to do with gas prices. And you can say all you want about the Strategic Petroleum Reserve or whatever. It has to deal with OPEC and with, look, we had a time when people weren't driving, so we dramatically reduced supply, and it turns out it's actually pretty hard in order to just ramp up immediately. And you're seeing the LNG tankers and all that other stuff in terms of how long it's getting in order to cross the Persian Gulf. Same thing, ramp up production here in the US. I've grown up around the oil industry for my entire life, and everybody there knows that the boom and bust cycle is part of the hardest problem of the industry, and that can cause some really crazy price fluctuations. And one of the things that Derek gets to here, and I'm just going to read this, quote, "The best solution to the everything shortage is to have a policy to make more of just about everything. Containers, like I was talking about earlier, which carry 90% of the world's traded goods, are overwhelmingly manufactured in China. Why does America not make more? Car parts, semiconductors, and home goods have all been offshored, making the United States solely reliant on overseas factories. Why can't America make more? At-home COVID tests, that's another perfect one. Those things saved my ass whenever I had COVID, and that's how I initially got the tests, and they were cheap and they were available, but from what I hear, you can't buy one in a CVS right now. That is actually the real policy, if I were to point to a single thing, which is, hey, let's increase domestic manufacturing capacity for some of these goods now that we have lived through a crazy event, and we say, hey, actually, it's probably not good to be relying on everyone. You know, I'm looking right now at the United Kingdom. It's the same thing. We were recently talking with someone, Marshall and I, on our podcast, The Realignment, and somebody was saying they're blaming Brexit. And I was like, no, it has nothing to do with Brexit. Or maybe it does to a marginal event. The Britain is an island nation. So it would make sense to me that in the middle of the greatest supply crisis since what, World War II, that we've seen on the global economy, in a highly more integrated, just-on-time delivery world, that yeah, the islands are going to be the people who suffer the most. If that's one takeaway for me, that's what it is. Let's make more stuff.
Let's go back to this weird period, March, April, May 2020. Everyone is peak unified in terms of COVID as a threat. We're concerned with, which it obviously is a threat. That's not disparagingly, but it wasn't quite the culture war take that it is today. We all have to dance around to certain degrees. We all agreed, hey, actually, like, domestic, resilient supply chains are incredibly important.
Everyone agreed on
this. World that we're describing, once again, this always takes about globalization after Trump's election, but the part that everyone likes, aka the fact that we can get goods, we can move around relatively freely, more than at any other time in human history, that's all great. But there's going to be other pandemics. There are going to be other problems. Like, it's just very clear that, once again, if we talk about in foreign policy, we had this idea during the 1990s that because the Soviet Union's gone, everything's going to be chill. Guess what the lesson in 2020 is? That world where we just saw the benefits of globalization, where we just said, hey, we can get whatever we get from whatever. Who cares? If we get our oranges from Mexico and our semiconductors from Taiwan, that's whatever. We are never going back to that world. And there's something that President Biden has to do, despite the cultural aspects of it. And this is to anyone who succeeds Joe Biden too. They have to focus on those resiliency things. Like, what do we do once we actually finally move past this? How do we not just let that May 2020 consensus go away? Because it's going to be so easy to say, you know what? Let's just get back to that. That was really great. Yeah. We don't have to be able to manufacture at-home tests or even containers, the least sexy thing ever. Domestically, that clearly is true, especially if we want to have a good Christmas, Hanukkah holiday season.
And this was the biggest failure of Trump. I mean, and people get mad when I talk about it because he might have been the first president to talk about it, but he was president during a time where he could have done something about it. And guess what? Net imports from China are up 54% under the Trump administration in the year 2020. And you know why? It's because Steve Mnuchin and a lot of people who worked in his administration explicitly blocked a Buy American executive order, which was sitting inside of the National Security Council, written by Peter Navarro, because they didn't want to piss off the Chinese and ensure that we could continue to have just-in-time delivery. And listen, maybe they were right. Maybe it would have led to the current situation that we had right now. But at what point do we deal with it? You have to do something. I mean, we have to make sure, like the shipping containers. Okay, it sounds like we need to build some shipping containers in this country. It sounds like at-home tests. I mean, this is the most basic medical infrastructure. These COVID tests, they're not rocket science, folks. They make them all over the world. In Europe, from what I hear, it's even government subsidized and it costs like $1 in order to get it. Why do we have to go out and buy it? What was I talking about earlier with Krystal's kids? Why do we require these expensive PCR tests for families? If you're I've had to go get a last-minute PCR test. It cost me like $250 for a rapid PCR. I mean, yeah, I can afford it, but what about somebody else if you're out there? That sucks, man. I mean, what are you supposed to do? That's a huge hit in order to have just a last-minute increase. We're all getting taxed effectively for the failure of government after government after government in order to make the country more resilient. And so when you're a leader, it's your job in order to do something about that. Of course, Congress right now is more focused on like whatever subpoenas are going out for January 6th. So I congratulate them on chasing the biggest story of the year. But in my opinion, this is it. Everybody at home can see, hey, when I order stuff, it takes a long time. And you just wait. Come Christmas, it is going to be national headlines. I ordered something for Christmas and it didn't get here until, January or something. Or I tried to order this and they were out of stock. Everybody in America is about to feel the consequences of this. And you should make sure, maybe send them a segment, send them something in order to explain to them. Be like, no, this is a very long time thing coming that policymakers saw. We were set up this way. We've had multiple opportunities now to at least try and get on the better path, and we haven't been doing it. And that, is a huge failure whenever it comes to Washington.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.